Today we're going to be discussing the quarter of a century following the end of World War I and the end of World War II. It's a very eventful period. Um, as you see on the slide here, these slides start with 1929. In order to understand this period, you really need to go back to the end of World War I. If you'll remember, on Wednesday we talked about the armistice that happened on November the 11th of 1918. Germany finally capitulates. They quit fighting, even though things continue to wind down during the following year. And during this time, after the armistice, the three major powers, the winners of the war, the Allied forces, consisting of Britain and France and the United States, they get together at Versailles and they work out a treaty to deal with the aftermath of the war. So we talked a little bit about Wilson's desire to form a League of Nations, which does get formed, even though the United States never actually joins the League. And I've got a video on that, so I want you to make sure you watch that. That'll sort of set the stage. So what happens in the 1920s in Germany is a reaction to this treaty. Remember, one of the features of the Versailles Treaty is this indemnity provision. Germany is held responsible for the war, and Britain, and particularly France, made sure that that provision was included in the treaty to make sure that the Germans paid back what they owed. Of course, there's no way to replace the millions of lives that were lost, but you know, I'm a lawyer in the daytime, and this is one thing that you see all the time is people trying to get compensation, monetary compensation, to make up for a tragedy, for a loss of some sort. So the Versailles Treaty is the place to begin to start understanding World War I. But there were some other things going on in the 1920s, and after the war ends, this is actually a pretty good situation if you're a banker in the United States, because during the 1920s, American banks figure out that they can make interest off of loaning money to Germany to repay the war debt. So the way this works is essentially a triangle, and unfortunately I don't have a whiteboard in front of me. But if you can imagine banks in the United States, maybe New York City, lending money to Germany, to the German government, and the German government is going to take that money that it's borrowed and use that money to pay Britain and France to pay these this war debt. Okay, so what do the U.S. banks get out of it? They get the interest that they're going to be earning. Germany is able to afford the reparations payments. Britain and France are receiving the reparations payments, and so this is good for their economy. This system lasts throughout most of the 1920s, but of course in 1929 we have Black Thursday. Recently, right after the day after Thanksgiving, is called Black Friday. That is seen as a good thing for retailers, but a Black Thursday was definitely not a good day for anybody. So that was October the 24th, 1929. That's the day that the New York stock market goes into a tailspin and begins a depression in the United States that eventually is going to spread to the rest of the world. Now, of course, the consequences of the Great Depression are enormous, and you could spend a whole course going over and trying to figure out all the ways that this financial crisis impacted the world. But one of the immediate consequences was that the New York banks that had been lending money to Germany suddenly decided that they weren't interested in doing that anymore. Um, they began to call the loans to Germany. And what this means is that the reparations payments that Germany had been making to Britain and France ceased. They dried up. So this had uh, a what do you call it? A domino effect on the economies of Britain and France. They quit buying as many things. Everybody in the world just sort of quit buying stuff. And that is known in economics as a contraction. And what that means is that people that are producing things are not selling as many of the things that they need to sell in order to make a profit. And so, anyway, by 1931, the Depression has made itself felt throughout the world. Now, even in the 1920s, you have, particularly in 1923, um, you saw a period of what we call hyperinflation, where the German government is printing marks, they're printing money at an enormous rate. And um, part of the goal there was to inflate the currency so that they could pay off this debt faster. But what it meant for people living in Germany was that they didn't the money they were earning wasn't enough to buy their basic needs. So you would get paid on Friday, and you would rush out to the store before your paycheck was worthless. So that was the situation in Germany, and this is one of the reasons why you start to see people like Hitler in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, um, become popular, become people that people want to put in charge because they're seen as strong leaders. They're seen as people who can fix a very bad situation by taking decisive measures. Now, I don't want to suggest that Franklin Roosevelt was in the same league as Hitler and Mussolini, but of course, he takes over. He becomes elected the United States president in 1932, and many of the New Deal programs that he inaugurates in the United States have some similarities with the nationalist programs in Italy and Germany, and even in the communist Russia, um, in the sense that we're looking at strong state involvement, strong federal involvement in the economy. So, okay, so speaking of Russia, speaking of the Soviet Union, remember last time we talked about the Communist Revolution of 1917 that knocks Russia out of the war, and Lenin is at the head of the movement until 1924 when he dies. There is a power struggle that follows, and the winner of that power struggle is a guy named Joseph Stalin. I have also put up a video on Stalin for you to watch, so make sure you take a look at that. Joseph Stalin was a real suspicious kind of guy, and he was always thinking that somebody was out to get him. And so this really impacted the way he ruled. He never trusted anybody, and so if he was in the least bit suspicious, even of people who probably would have considered themselves his friends, he didn't hesitate to have them arrested, and the word we use today would be maybe disappeared. So we'll finish talking about Stalin in another video in just a minute. I'm not going to do a whole lot of videos today because I've given you so much to watch, but what I'm trying to do here is tie together all of the material that I've already put in front of you.